By merely reading this phrase, you are perceiving through language. What do you think of when I say the word black? Do you think of emptiness or lack of light? Or what about the color white? Do you think of purity, light, or innocence? The words of black and white are used to describe the extremes of our life in a dualistic manner, and we tend to place these concepts, such as good and evil, happy and depressed, into the boxes of black and white. However, what happens when we place humans into these boxes? The language surrounding race has historically been dualistic, placing individuals in either the oppressed box or the powered box, rather than being encompassing of all skin colors. The colors white and black function as deep metaphors or binary oppositions for a plethora of sociocultural dividing lines in contemporary society. The dualistic form of black and white has also seeped into the context of art throughout centuries. The symbolic meanings are not only seen in race, but also in historical representations of good and evil, as well as light and dark.
In Renaissance and Baroque art, light was a tool that artists used to define their subject matters and bring out a sense of realism in the picture. Their works explore the contrasts between light and darkness and remain clearly defined within sharp boundaries. The technique of contrasting light and dark is called chiaroscuro, which literally means light, dark in Italian. Tenebrism, meaning dark, gloomy, mysterious, is another style of painting using profoundly pronounced chiaroscuro, where there are violent contrasts of light and dark, and where darkness becomes a dominating feature of the image. The effects of light became particularly important to artists when they frequently associated light with their theories of colors. In the 12th, 13th, and 14th century, the symbolic meaning of light pervaded theology, philosophy, and cosmology. Medieval thinkers considered light to be God or emanated from God. The ancient philosopher Aristotle believed that God was light and God's light gives splendor to the whole of creation. Light is what allows the beauty of objects, especially their color, to become illuminated in order to display their beauty to the fullest. It was said, light comes from God and light is an image of this archetypal good. Thus, the good is also praised by the name light, just as an archetype is revealed in its image. Light was an important condition for beauty, and darkness was perceived as evil, negation, and the ugly. Humanist and art theorist Leon Alberti like bright things by nature, and that the dark and black should be avoided.
The ideas of good and evil within light and dark has spilled over into the boxes of black and white race. Many times, the labels of black and white place people of races into very distinct boxes.
At the beginning of the 20th century, William Edward Vigard du Bois compiled a series of photographs for the American Negro exhibit for the Paris Exposition. He was committed to combating racism with empirical evidence of the economic, social, and cultural conditions of African Americans. He believed that a clear revelation of the facts of African American life and culture would challenge the claims of biological race scientists, which proposed that African Americans were inherently inferior to Anglo-Americans. The photographs of the affluent young African American men and women challenged the scientific evidence and popular racist caricatures of the day that ridiculed and sought to diminish African American social and economic success. Further, the wide range of hairstyles and skin tones represented in the photographs demonstrated that so-called Negro type was in fact a diverse group of distinct individuals. The one public statement Du Bois made concerning these photographs was that visitors to the American Negro exhibit would find several volumes of photographs of typical Negro faces, which hardly square with conventional American ideas.
Harlem Renaissance had become the destination for most of African Americans in the early 1900s. It was a movement when artists and writers of color explored what it meant to be an artist, what it meant to be black, what it meant to be an American, and the intersectionality of living out of all those identities at the same time. While serving as a social and political movement, it was also largely an artistic movement, inspiring literature, music, poetry, art, drama, and dance. They were looking to find a way to achieve equality and civil rights. With a stronger black community, Harlem Renaissance had started its movement in 1910 to fight for their American rights, as well as to create a black box that is less oppressed than the white box.
Langston Hughes was a writer and one of the most influential figures to come from the Harlem Renaissance. Hughes refused to differentiate between his personal experience and the common experience of Black America. He wanted to tell the stories of his people in ways that reflected their actual culture, including both their suffering and their love of music, laughter, and language itself. He wrote The Negro Artist and the Racial Mountain, which is essentially a manifesto for Black writers who feel tied in by structures imposed by their race. What he makes clear is that the task of the Black writer was no different from that of any other writer, to write the best work they could about whatever they wanted while resisting the pressure to be defined by the racial agendas of others. An excerpt of The Negro Artist and the Racial Mountain goes as follows. One of the most promising of the young Negro poets said to me, "I want to be a poet, not a Negro poet," meaning I believe I want to write like a white poet, meaning subconsciously I would like to be a white poet, meaning behind that I would like to be white. And I was sorry the young man said that, for no great poet has ever been afraid of being himself, and I doubted then that with his desire to run away spiritually from his race, this boy would ever be a great poet. But this is the mountain standing in the way of any true Negro art in America, this urge within the race towards whiteness, the desire to pour racial individuality into the mold of American standardization, and to be as little Negro and as much American as possible. The Harlem Renaissance helped to inspire a generation of Black artists today who don't want to be confined by their race. One of these is Amy Cheryl, the artist behind Michelle Obama's official White House portrait. Cheryl wants her subjects to be mirrors of their viewers, notable not for their race but for their familiarity. It was this thinking that led Cheryl to her signature style of rendering her subjects' skin tones in shades of gray. She says, "I didn't want the work to be marginalized and put in a corner because I don't want the discussion to be around solely identity." Her work is seen as blackness without the gaze of whiteness.
Society has created boxes through language to understand the world, which, because these boxes are different, has turned into unequal treatment between the people placed within the various groups. Although we have not completely moved into a society based on a spectrum where multiple identities can be embraced, we hope that we will continue to move towards a society based on a spectrum, and if not a spectrum, a society of equal boxes. Solutions to societal problems come from artists and help to inform the culture. However, it takes more than just the artists.